Okay, now we're back with our problem set, and this is Module 5, Lesson 4. This lesson had a lot of like stations and things set up in the classroom where that would have been really tough for us to do on a virtual learning platform such as this. So what we're going to do is I just kind of modified the lesson here. I'm just going to practice drawing objects out and partitioning them into different size holes. We're going to use like unit fractions and such like that. So follow along with me. If you could print out this page, great. If not, it's okay. Just grab a blank piece of paper and a pencil and just move along with us as best you can, all right? So number 1 here talks about draw 3 of the same sized rectangles and partition them into different fractional units. Shade one of the units and label. So it doesn't tell us exactly what fractional units to split them into, so we're just going to come up with some, all right? So we're going to come up with 3 rectangles. So when I think of a rectangle, I think of a tape diagram. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw 3 rectangles about this big, and I'm going to put them one over the top of the other. I'm going to take great care in making sure that my rectangles here are the same exact size. Okay, I'm gonna not make them a little bit bigger and try to make them exactly the same size. Now, those are close, not perfect. I don't have a computer hand, but if I did, it'd be like a plotter. All right, here, come out, and good. So 3 of the same size rectangles. So now I need to decide on different fractional units. So my mother always told me to keep it simple, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep this simple here. So what I'm going to do is just split the first one in halves, all right? So my first one, I'm going to say, this is going to be cutting my fractional units to be halves. So I'm just going to cut it right down the middle. I'm going to estimate where the middle is and look up, there it is. All right, and then this says shade one of the units and label. So I'm going to shade just one of these these fractional units here, and I'm going to label this as 1/2. Okay, just like that. The next one, let's just go up the list here. I can do thirds. All right, now thirds a little bit more difficult, because I can find the halfway point. Now in thirds, I have to estimate. So I use these little tick marks here on the top to estimate approximately where I want to be. And if I make that line whole throughout the other side, I'm going to have 3 equal parts here. So I got that, and I got that. So 3 equal parts, not perfect, but close enough, freehand. And I'm going to shade one of those parts. I'll just shade this one. And if I have 3 parts and one of them is shaded in, gives me 1/3. It's 1/3, right? So the final one would do this one as fourths. And fourths I like because 4 is an even number. So 3 cuts is going to give me 4. So what I like to do is go right down the middle for my first one because 4 is an even number. So then I have to get 2 and 2. Well, that's pretty easy enough here, right? So I cut the halves in half. Cut those halves in halves, I get fourths or quarters, all right? And my job is to shade one of those in. I'll shade this one. I shade that one in. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, okay? And I've got one of them shaded in, that's 1/4. And that's it. That's all it asked me to do. We're going to do this a few more times, and we'll be done with today's lesson, all right? So moving on to this one. Draw 3 of the same size squares and partition them into different fractional units. Shade one of the units and label. So 3 of the same size squares. So squares have 4 equal sides, 4 right angles, and that's it, okay? Opposite sides are parallel too. So I do this. Trying to make the same size as best I can. All right. And let's do this one. See here, let's do this one halves. I can do it this way or this way. I'll just come down here. Same thing, I'm going to shade this in, just like that. And I'm going to label that as 1/2. This next one, same square, I can also do this into fourths. Now here's a different way to do it. I can put like a little plus sign. I got this cut in half, then cut each of those halves in half. And there I've got 4 equal parts. I partition this one into fourths. And if I shade one of them in, there's my 1/4. Now I could have just drawn 3 lines down like that, but perfect square like this looks like a window pane. You know, if you're looking out a window, right? Little mullions in the windows. Over here, we're gonna do sixths. All right, so first when I do 6, I'd like to cut them in thirds. So remember those little tick marks I like to do up top? All right, those little tick marks let me know if I'm looking even here. And I think it is pretty good. So I'm just gonna draw a straight line down from either side here. And there's thirds. Now, if I cut each of those in half, I'm gonna double it, make it 6, but there'll be smaller pieces, of course. So I'm just gonna draw a line right across, just like that. And then I'm gonna shade one of them in. And I end up with this with 1/6. Whoops. Yeah, 1/6. Good. All right. Number 3 says, draw 3 of the same size circles and partition them into different fractional units. Now circles, this is where it gets tricky. So let's give it a shot. We're going to draw 3 of the same size circles. If you're not great at drawing circles, that's okay. We can do your best. I mean, that's all we can do, right? Is do our best. And I feel like that's the mantra we're living by in these days. Just do your best, all right? And learners will learn, okay? You can't help but learn, okay? Just by paying attention, listening, you will learn. Okay, so 3 circles here. Now circles, if you remember what I said the last time, you must go through the center. You must have a center point here, okay? So I'm just gonna put my center point in all of these circles so I just remember that, okay? Because equal size pieces matters a whole lot. And again, let's keep these simple. So here, to get halves is right down the middle. So I can shade one of those in, and I can go halves. Okay. Over here, I just said we should say simple, but we're gonna ramp it up a little bit. Let's do this one as thirds and this one as sixths, okay? So if I do thirds here, I'm gonna show you how I do this, all right? First of all, I'm gonna go from the top down to the center and stop. Then what I need to do is figure out, I need to kind of branch off in these 2 directions this way, all right? So I need to come down here, kind of like a Mercedes-Benz sign, all right? And it looks just like that, okay? That takes a lot of practice. So if you're not quite there yet, it's okay. Just do your best. Like I said, just do your best. Shade one of those in, and I'll end up with, sorry, this should be 1/2. I'll do 1/3. Okay. And over here, we want this one in the sixths. A couple different ways we can make sticks. I could do this again here and then cut each of those thirds in half. But I'll show you a way I like to do it. Since 6 is an even number, I just like to cut it down the middle first. And then I'll have to get 3 pieces on this side, 3 pieces on that side. And how I do that is just draw an X, like that. Okay, right through. And I see these pieces in my eye look a little bit bigger than the rest, but since I'm doing it freehand, it's acceptable. And we know that I tried to make them all even. So this is cut up into sixths. So if I shade one of them in, one of my unit fractions, I'll have 1/6. That's just like that, okay? All right, so up here I should take off the S, just notice that. Okay, and on the back, here we go. So on the back side, or the next page side of your paper, we have, using 3 number lines below, partition them in the specified fractional units. So we have thirds, fifths, and eighths. Okay, so pay close attention. I want to show you how this is done. Now, when I have a number line, I always like to mark, it's not always going to be this way, but to start off with, let's just mark this first part as 0, and this is 1. So that represents our entire whole. And remember, this is 0 mark, that's 1, so that's 1 whole. And if I need to mark this into thirds, thirds gives me 2 cuts, all right? These don't count as cuts, they count as endpoints. So it's super important that we understand that those are endpoints, not cuts. So I need to cut this into 2 spots. So I'm gonna make like light tick marks, kind of estimating where I think I need to be. And this looks pretty good, all right? So once I'm happy with my tick marks, I darken them in. And then I have thirds. See, 2 cuts is thirds. A lot of kids will count this in the beginning, say 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, 4 cuts, doesn't that make fifths? And that's not the way to do it. Beginning and end points don't count as cuts, all right? What I do want to count as is this. I see this piece right here, this piece right here, and this piece right here. Those are my thirds. 1, 2, 3 thirds, okay? So super important that we understand that in number lines, because we're going to be jumping headfirst in number lines, and they're going to help us out amazingly well, all right? So fifths. Fifths is another odd number, so we have to kind of estimate how many cuts for fifths. If you said 4, you are correct. So again, I'm going to label this as 0 and this is 1 because that's my whole, and I need 4 cuts. So how I'm going to do this, I have to light tick marks, just light, so I can erase. I'm going to estimate here, here, there's 2, 3, and 4. And I've been doing this a long time, so I kind of know how it's done. So my estimates are pretty good. So if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, I've got my fifths. So remember, do not count the 0 and the 1. Those are endpoints. So I'm going to darken these in to show that I've got my fifths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces right there. And you can see them, okay? Now finally, eighths. Eighths is an even number, so it's going to be a little easier for us. And I want to make sure I show you exactly how this is done from here on out. So I'm going to label my endpoints as 0 and 1. Okay, and that's important, all right, because that's a whole. Sometimes we'll label these as different numbers, but we'll get into that later, all right? So for eighths, I need 7 cuts, all right? So 7 cuts are going to work like this. So since 8 eighths is an even number, I can cut it in half. So I find my halfway point. I'm right-handed, so I don't have to cover up my end. So I pull my hand over so I can see the whole line. And I'm just going to give a light mark there and be happy with my half, yeah. Now from here on out, it's pretty easy because now we're just going to cut our halves in halves, and then I cut our fourths in half. So I'm going to cut my half in half. Halfway point, halfway point. There's 3 cuts. 1, 2, 3. And I've got 1, 2, 3 fourths. Now I got to cut each of those in half. So this is my 4th cut, 5th cut, 6th cut, 7th cut. So now I should have 8 equal parts. So this should be cut into eighths. So if I look here, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 equal parts, which is eighths. I did it. Now, if you can look closely, you can scrutinize and say, well, Mr. Sherwin, those aren't all equal parts. And you'd be right, okay? But doing it freehand, you do the best that you can, and that's what we're going to live with, all right? So after you're done watching this, please go on to Google Classroom and see the quick check that's there, and give it your best shot. The last one is a extended response question where I tried to put in every single scenario possible for extended responses, or a complete sentence anyways. Give it your best shot. If you got it wrong, I'm sure you got it right. All right, don't worry. All right, I miss you guys terribly, and I will see you soon.